Okay, so still don't know what the opening should be for this. Yeah, we're just going to talk about books, and I have a couple books that I've finished within the last 3 weeks or so, and some books that I started to read recently. So the first book we're going to be talking about is The Troop by Nick Cutter. Then we will do The First Men in the Moon, an H.G. Wells classic. And then I have finally reading Blood of Elves. I've read the other 2 books in the suggested reading order, which is something, I don't know, not really sure what the order is off the top of my head, but this is the first book in the actual series, so pretty stoked about that. I finally read it. Anyway, so editor me here. I forgot that I also read Authority, so I'm going to stitch that, or every clip related to that, at the end of this video. So that's gonna be a thing. I read Authority. It was good. Spoiler alert. Well, I'll do an update on what I'm currently reading as well. At the end, maybe we'll figure that out. There should be some like cuts somewhere, but first, let's talk about The Troop and my feelings towards it as I read. So The Troop is the only one that I actually took notes on, because my friend said, take notes, it makes better YouTube videos. So I want to go over like the summary of my feelings towards this book in general. So it's really just, I hate Shelley. I hate Shelley so much. You don't know who Shelley is yet, but when I explain who Shelley is, you'll also hate Shelley. Then I also don't like most of the characters anyway, but you really hate Shelley. And it's like the series, the book really is, it's a mixture of the Lord of the Flies meets body mutation horror, and that's the feeling of the book. And your hatred for Shelley. That's very important to the feeling of this book. I have written this down multiple times, and even in my notes, it's one of the most noted things in this note, like, pages towards the book, is how much I hate Shelley. So, let's go over the plot. So, basically the plot follows a Boy Scout troop, on their way to on their annual hiking summer camping trip thing, right? So they normally spend like a week on a secluded island, I think in like northeast Canada, and with their one scoutmaster. Okay, so it's like a group of like 5 children with one scoutmaster on a secluded island where no one lives, and they just do that every week. I mean, for a week, or for the summer as part of their scouting thing. And this year is going to be different though, as a mutated parasite ravages the island that they're on, and we have questions of how and who will survive this horror. Like, that's the plot. And that's a thing. That's the plot. That's a thing. And overall, you can understand from this plot why it's kind of similar to The Lord of the Flies, because it's mostly about children. They're isolated on an island, and there's just that social dynamic element that happens among like isolated child stories. That happens at the same time. This is like horrifying. So I'm gonna give you like a moment by moment breakdown. I think, or let me just go over the characters first. Let me just go over the characters first, and then give you the moment by moment breakdown. So, nowhere, North Coast, East Coast, Canada, right? I don't like him. I don't like him as a vibe. The idea of his character is that he's an outsider. He's an outsider of town. He's not originally from there. And he just makes mental rude remarks about like the boys and where they'll be. He's like the type of adult who does like tracking. If you know what that is, where who believes in it. Basically, this idea of you're not that great at something, and so you're always going to be not that great at something, or you're always going to be in that type of vibe or way. And in terms of like education, that's what tracking is. And he does that for these children in terms of like where they'll be for the rest of their lives. And I just don't like his brain thoughts, basically, for most of the book. Then we have Kent. Kent is your stereotypical jock type. Kent is spelled Kent. He's rude to adults, and he's just like the general bully in the group who wants to be seen as a leader, you know, like the bully leader stereotype. Then you have F, which stands for Ephraim. He's like also a bully, but in a different sense than Kent. Actually, every single one of these characters are in some sense a bully, except for Newton, which I'll go into like right after F, or like right after similarly after F. So as I was saying, F is also a bully. F has temper issues. They are mentally unstable for part of the book due to what's happening on the island, and their background is that their dad is in jail. I think he's in jail or he's in prison. I don't remember which one he's in, or for what. He's in jail or in prison, and F feels bad about this as like a sign of that maybe with F's temper issues that he might be something like his dad, and he doesn't want to do that. He doesn't want to be that. So that's kind of the reason behind F's voice into the story. Then you have Max, which is the best friend to Ephraim. He is a voice of reason for the group. Generally is what the vibe I got from him. Then going on to Newton is the only kid who is not a bully because he is the victim of bullying of this scout group. He's smart, he's nerdy, he's chubby, and he just wants people to view him as better than what they're currently viewing him as he's a victim of bullying, and it makes sense. But he also has a really strong mindset in terms of being able to be on this island, which I'll go into later. Then we have Shelley, and my hatred for him. Shelley is... There's just so much wrong with Shelley's character that, there's just so much wrong with Shelley's character. Shelley basically is the type of kid who hurts animals, and is mentally isolated from the others in the sense of like he doesn't feel allegiance to any of the people near him. I really hate Shelley. Shelley's the stereotyper, killer of animal, sociopath, psychotic character in our story. He's our last character breakdown that I'm going to do isn't really a person as a character. It's more of this idea that inside this book there are intermissions, basically, of the actual plot and story dynamic of our main characters to give us interviews and article pages and stuff like that. Of the world outside of the island that they're isolated on. And I really like this. Nick Cutter says at the end of the book that he was thinking about Carrie, the Stephen King book, which I haven't read. But it just something similar he says, and he wanted to have it in his book. And I'm going to say the intermissions are, in a sense, another character, at least in my opinion. And it's like a character whose narrative is unreliable at first, and as I said, gives you outside knowledge, and I don't even know what, and it's slightly spoiler. It slightly spoils the book for you. That's what I wrote about this character breakdown. But that's the kind of stuff in it. So now I'm gonna do like a moment by moment breakdown, and in this moment by moment breakdown, there should be like some interludes of me actually reading, I think, but I'm not sure. Some cuts, some dries, right? So it So it took me 100 pages. This book is like, I don't know. Give me a second. I don't even know where I put the book. So I'm moving around for a book that I just lost. I need to return it. Oh, I'm just blind. So, or I lack a peripheral vision with this mask on. So, the moment by moment breakdown. So this book is, it's like around. It's around like 350 pages long. Okay, so this book is around 350 pages long, and it's supposed to be a horror. Okay, let me give you that as a understanding of how this book works. And the moment by moment breakdown is it took me 100 pages to actually have fear from the book, and since I already knew it was supposed to be a horror going in, I just wasn't. I was just bored. It was more since. Not that it's more that I wasn't just bored. It's just that when I said my summary of my feelings and how I disliked most of the characters in the story, it means that I had to read 100 pages about characters I didn't like. I had vehemently disliked throughout the book, and who most of the time my loathing for them didn't. It only got worse as I read the book, and so I had to read 100 pages of that, almost one third of the book, where I had no fear and I was just reading about characters I didn't like. Then around the 120 page mark, I finally felt fear. Which is great. It's great, which I was happy about. I'm somebody who, as a youth, watched Monsters Inside Me, which was, if you're in U.S. Canada market, was a television show or Animal Planet about like parasites and how easy it is for them to get inside you and just ruin your body. And this elicited the same type of fear as that, and I was pretty happy for that. And like after I would read the book at this moment, I had twitches and spasms as I have anxiety issues, and I was so happy because it was due to fear that I decided for myself. So then 80 pages later, around the 200 page mark, the horror moments weren't a thing anymore, and it was particularly just Lord of the Flies, social dynamics among children, and I was sad again reading this book because I said I didn't really like any of the characters, and I didn't like any of the characters, and now we're gonna talk about the last pages, or we're gonna talk about the social dynamic element of the book, and which is the last, let's say, 150 pages, or 175 pages of the book. And just like how it worked and why I dislike Shelley so much. Okay, so basically, I'm saying that what I'm saying and how the story actually went from middle story to end game of the story is basically that we have these kids on this island, and the first one to die, spoiler alert, is we're in spoiler territory here, right? So the first one to die was Scoutmaster Tom, or to be infected was Scoutmaster Tom, is more correctly to say. But basically the scenario is that in this story there is a man whose name I can't remember because his name's not important. There's just this man who has been infected by this parasite that has been grown in a lab, and he has gone to this isolated island with the troop members on it, and just the one scoutmaster. I'm gonna have to do so much editing in this. You can hear so many people in the background. I'm gonna be so upset. But what was I saying? So, Patient Zero, that's the wording. Patient Zero went to this island, and he went to this island, and the first person that he talked to was Scoutmaster Tom. So Patient Zero's brain, we get to see some of this within brains and thought process within this, in the beginning-ish of the story, is that Patient Zero has a need to eat, like an extreme need to eat, but none of the food is giving them nutrients. And it's so extreme and it's so craven that Patient Zero has eaten rocks, he was eating dead animals, he's eaten battery parts, he has put in anything into his mouth to eat. And we have this Patient Zero being Patient Zero and knowing that this is going on in his body, but also not knowing at all. Like, the way that the situation is explained for this story is that when you are infected, your dopamine is high, and your eyesight, and you're hallucinating a little, and it's very hard. You know that you have this extreme hunger, but and you know that like the hunger is very like a painful, starving type of hunger, but you have a hard time seeing for what is your surroundings and your own self due to the illusions and stuff like that. Patient Zero has run away from a lab because he was being tested on, and that's how he got this parasite in his body. And this is how the story starts, right? So he runs away from the lab, he gets to the island that the scouts are on, and Scoutmaster Tom, as somebody, as I mentioned, his character background is being a general practitioner, sees a sick man and tries to help him. And then the story just goes from there. So, yeah, the story just goes from there in the sense of like, this is where Scoutmaster Tom gets infected and realizes that this man that he's let into his cabin, let into his bedroom, might be crazy. And might be disturbed, or it might be running away from the law. It's just like, there's a lot of things going in Scoutmaster Tom's mind. And so what he does at first is he tells all the scouts to get their hiking patch or whatever. I was barely in anything related to like scouting groups, even though I have done like outside hikes with groups. So I don't know how this patch system works, but they're supposed to get a patch by hiking alone. And so all the scouting people, the children go hike alone for a day, as Scoutmaster Tom, this general practitioner, tries to work with this patient. And because of this scene transition, we are completely and utterly into just like the characters themselves in the beginning. And from there, we get to see the character dynamics with each other, and how I dislike all the characters. I just dislike bullying, and as a youth, I didn't really do that, though I understand it, but it's not in the same way, so I just didn't vibe with them because of it, and there needs to be rude to each other in the way that they were. And so I had to see all of that for a while, and that was fine and boring. And fine, boring, and characters that I disliked and cemented my despise for their social boy hierarchy that this book verbally gave the vibes of. And is more what I'm trying to look at. Or professes, that's the word. So, from there, what happens next? The boys do their hike, they almost die a little, without any supervision, and they come back to see that the Scoutmaster seems to have lost weight, because this parasite that's going to ravage the island, is similar to is like a mutated, what's it called? It's a mutated worm, It's it's a mutated worm in your body. Whatever that worm is, you know, that worm that you can get in your stomach that eats what you eat and just can cause some like problems in your guts. They say it in the book, but I completely and utterly forgot. Anyway, so a tapeworm. It's like a mutated tapeworm. This dude has it. He doesn't really. Scoutmaster Tom doesn't really realize what it is yet. Trying to go through this plot as fast as possible. He doesn't really realize what it is yet, but he wants to find out because he knows he's sick, and he knows that like something has changed within him. He takes one of the kids, Max, and he tells Max to help him dissect the body. The patient 0 has now become a dead person at this point, between the interlude between when the kids went hiking and now. And this general practitioner is going to try to dissect this body like he's a surgeon with a child who has limited knowledge of dissecting, and just the only relation Max has to body and anatomy is that his father is a taxidermy, okay? And the morgue practitioner for their small town. But this is a child, and just the idea that this child might gain the info isn't really a sure probability thing, and so you're really just saying, hey child, dissect the body with me, like an actual human body, and we're going to do this, and it's going to be really weird. And so from that point, we get to see this tapeworm as they dissect it open. We get to see the tapeworm literally come out like the size of a arm, or like larger than my arm is how I apparently imagined it, and come out from the body and trying to attack Max and Scoutmaster Tom. And at this point in the story, we realize what this is. It's some type of parasitic thing living in the body of humans, and we know as the audience, and Max knows, that Scoutmaster Tom has been infected with this, and they have knowledge of this. And so we come out from like this scene to move into a transitional scene of Scoutmaster Tom saying, nobody go into this cabin, and I'm going to give you all of you guys this food, and we're going to wait for the boat to come tomorrow, which is when it's supposed to come, I think, from this point in the story. The boat to come and for us to be rescued. And what happens at this point is that I just like all the characters, so we have this, and I mentioned that Kent is the bully jock type who is not into adult figures at this moment and believes that they should be the leader. This dude rouses all the children in a mob psycho in this point in the story and shoves the Scoutmaster and locks him in a closet. And locks him in a closet for the fear that he is also sick. Though the Scoutmaster claims, I'm not sick, guys. I'm not sick, don't do this. But everybody can tell that he's definitely utterly sick. So, I don't like this scene. I mean, I don't know. I've never been in a mob situation like that, and I'm also like a super germaphobe, and I've been a super germaphobe for a very long time. So, like, since like middle school, I have had germophobia problems, right? And so these children, while they're doing this scene of like this parasitic thing on their body, to me, it just doesn't make sense. I mean, I'm just gonna have to assume that, like, given a normal person who doesn't have germophobia problems and problems with like parasites and just viruses and like this idea of it bringing you anxiety, I just have to assume that this could be a possibility. Like, this could be a mob-ish possibility, but like, honestly, I think it was a pretty gross scene, and I don't understand why so many of these 5 children-ish, can't remember the number, but I know all their names. I just don't understand why they would touch Scoutmaster Tom. I don't understand why they would touch Scoutmaster Tom and put him in a closet. I understand why he needed to go in the closet, like, it makes sense. But I don't understand, like, why they would mob all over him in the sense of, like, touching him, might have him clawed on, might be sick, and all of this other stuff. They don't know how the disease gets transferred. And I already said that one of the kids is legitimately smart. And then Max is a voice of reason, being the other kid. So 2 out of, like, these 5 kids, yeah, I think it's, like, 5 kids. Wow. Like, 2 out of these 5 kids should be smart enough to know, like, this isn't a mob situation. But somehow this is a mob situation, and it's just a really weird moment for me in my brain. And after this mob situation, we get our second person who's infected, which is Kent, the leader, the jock type leader. He gets infected, and all the kids from this infection get to see how fast this infection takes hold and changes the body, mental well-being of the people, and how scary this is. And that's basically where the fear element ends, where I'm going to say that. That's basically where the fear element ends, and we are at that moment. That's basically where the fear element ends in the story. There's a little bit more fear elements in terms of, like, me being afraid by reading it, but I think that's basically it. Wait, no. I said 200 pages. This isn't the 200 page mark. Give me a second. Anyway, at the 200 page mark. Yeah. So basically, we have a little bit more of the story before I get to when it goes completely Lord of the Flies. So basically, from this moment of Kent is infected, Kent feels bad about his infection. This realization that jock type character, with his background being that his father's is the town sheriff's. So he is having this mental interplay between the expectation of being like, I'm supposed to be better than the other ones because that's what my dad has told me. But I also know that adults aren't that great because I'm a teenager, tween type of element thoughts going on in his head as he's being affected. We get a couple pages of this. This isn't scary, it's just, like, sad. Kent's sad because Kent knows he's about to die or whatever has taken hold of him. It doesn't look good for him, right? So we have some pages of that. Then we go from there to Shelley setting up in the back. I really hate Shelley, and this is one of those moments where you hate Shelley. The whole entire thing about Shelley from this point on, and it's going to go into when we get to page 200, is that Shelley's goal is just to be that stereotypical sociopath, psychotic character in our group. And I don't know how old these boys are, but I think they're, like, tween, early teen age from the vibe that I'm getting in the story. And so I'm not a guy, right? I'm not a guy, so I don't know exactly, but, like, I just think that Shelley is too much of, like, the stereotyped evil, psychotic, mentally sociopathic character that I just really hate it. I just really hate it. And I'm just going to explain it now. So Shelley is the type of character who is supposed to lack empathy for other people, who likes things that are hurt, but not only likes to hurt things, gets aroused by things that are hurt and getting away with hurting people and manipulating people to hurt other people. So but he's like a tween, okay? He's a tween having arousal scenes in this horror book, and I'm not here for that. I am not here for that in my story about tween Lord of the Flies kind of vibes. And but I have to read this, and this is one of the reasons why I hate Shelley as a character, and like not like as a character as in personal traits which he exhibits, but also as a character as a stereotype, or being a sociopath and being somebody who what is the other one, that other mental illnesses, right? Of problems with empathy and understanding other people's emotional viewpoints. And I just don't like this trope stereotype at all, and seeing it being used for a tweenish child gives me quite a lot of pain. And I mention this because in this scene, or in this part of the book, we're getting into the Lord of the Flies moment, even though we're not at the 200-page mark, and there's still like horror in it. But in this particular scene, we have Shelley making manipulations through verbal edging on the characters of Kent, as Kent is still like about to be really sick, like right beforehand, and he definitely is infectious. That is one thing, and making Kent fight Ephraim, the character who has a temper issue, who they are working to fix, who is mentally unstable and questioning themselves mentally due to knowing that they have a temper issue, knowing that they need to work on it. And he edges them on to fight each other. And this is the start for me of like the Lord of the Flies moment, even though there is some type of horror interlude, because as I said, Kent is going to get worse in his infection. We're going to see that, and we're going to watch that, and we're going to have the characters watch that, and it's like gross, and body mutation, and it's just perfect. It's gross, and body mutation, and just perfect, and I really liked reading it. It gave me quite fear. And, but at this moment, I think from this moment of Shelley doing this manipulation of the fight scene, and then what goes on next as we get more Lord of the Flies and more like social dynamics being the most important part of this island, other and not the infectious, mutated tapeworms that are literally eating bodies and making bodies eat bodies. We have Shelley making F with saying in his ears, trying to comfort F, trying to alienate F from his BFF and from his BFF, which is our voice of reason in the story, Max, as Max being the character of the voice of reason, and alienating him from Newton, our stereotypical smart character. And Shelley alienates Ephraim to actually self-hurt himself. And it's just a scene that I feel really bad for this kid. I felt really bad for this kid. Like, I didn't like the kid because he was a bully and he was mean and stuff like that, but like, child self-infliction of pain to that degree, it's not even just like, I'm slitting my wrist. It's like, I am stabbing myself and trying to pull out the sinews of my body as I blind myself, trying to pull out the floaters, because I'm worried that this is a tapeworm. I'm worried that the sinews are a parasite, and I'm not smart enough to know the difference between them. And I'm literally he's literally having a mental breakdown, and he's being edged on by this Shelley character who is feeling happy about this and aroused about this situation, and I just hated it. I just completely hated this. And then from there, we go from not only Ephraim being in this situation, Ephraim eventually dying from his self-inflicted wounds, we go into these scenes of our last, I guess it was like 4 children. Wait. Yeah, it was 5. We go from our scene of like Shelley edging Lord Ephraim to Shelley trying to kill the other children as well. And this is our market into the Lord of the Flies, where the issue isn't, the tapeworm isn't the biggest issue on the island, it is just the other child. And the other child's want for violence and their brain problems. And so we go from, now that Max and Newton are the only two, our voice of reason and our smart kid, the only 2 characters still in existence, we go from their fight, which is basically their fight for survival, and their fight for survival to kill Shelley and to get off the island, being the main part of the last 150 pages of the book. And it's not, and the parasite is still there, not to say that it's not, but like, for me reading this book, the parasite wasn't scary anymore, because my main issue was my loathing and hatred towards Shelley and the social dynamic that was playing out in this island for children. And it was just weird, and honestly, I was very weirded about it. I'm weirded about it. Is there any notes that I want to share? I have a lot of notes about my hatred for Shelley. There was some imagery that was, the writing style was great. It was a fast, speedy read, relatively, and yeah, it was a fast and speedy read, relatively, because the chapters were so short. Like, I don't know the average for the chapters, but given a vibe for them with the intermissions, I would say a chapter was like 5 pages at most, or an average. So you'd be like, oh yeah, I can read a couple chapters, and you end up reading a lot more pages because you're like, well, it's only a couple more, and I have the time for it. So pretty fast read due to that, and due to the use of article intermissions and graphics within it. So there are some pages that just had a graphic, and it was barely any words, and you were just looking at a picture, which was fine. I don't have, none of these are Orin one of those, or Orin the picture one. And it also used imagery and came back to the imagery later in the book to resonate with like feelings and foreshadowings, which I appreciated. So that's the truth. I also wanted to say that I'm not going to rate books anymore. I don't really rate books naturally. It's just not a thing I do. When I say books, I mean like word novel things that are primarily you're getting the information from words on a page. I do rate movies and comic books, but and like graphic novels and stuff, but I just feel weird about rating books. And when I was watching my videos and editing them for the books that I tried to rate, I just felt like my ratings weren't exactly what I would want from a rating, and so I'm just not going to rate it, and I'm instead going to answer 3 or 4 questions that I'm going to figure out what they are exactly on the books and stuff like that after reading them. So the first question was, did I like the book? I liked the book. It was good. I read it. Yeah, there's a lot of things I didn't like about the book, but overall, I just liked the book. Would I recommend the book? I think it would be a particular person that I could recommend this book to, just because it was, there was a tween arousal scene, and a couple of them, and I just feel like that's weird and odd, and I just can't normally recommend that as my horror book. Of all the horror books I could recommend, it might not be this one. But if they wanted a Lord of the Flies kind of book, maybe this would be the book I could recommend. So I could recommend it. Could I see somebody else liking it that's really huge in most of my rating systems? Yeah, I could, and I could understand, and I could talk to somebody about this book, which means this book was good, in the questions that I care about when, you know, reading a book. The next book I read was The First Man in the Moon. I took, as you can see, I did take notes, but I didn't really write any notes or in the book afterwards, because, you know, this is a vibe, and we're figuring out what I'm gonna do. So, First Man in the Moon is an H.G. Wells classic. It's an H.G. Wells classic. The summary of the feelings I felt for this book were mostly that I felt the book was slow, and I didn't like the main character pairing. And by main character pairing, I don't mean like they were shipped together. I just mean the main characters were a pair, and we followed that pair through the book. In the sense of we had one character and another character being our leads. But I overall enjoyed the book, and I have a thing for magazine sci-fi from back in the day, and so like when I say I overall enjoyed the book, I mean like I enjoyed the book. So what's the plot of this book? So the plot of the book is we follow. This was published in like early 1900s. So I want to give that idea as well in terms of like where we are in sci-fi ideas and where we are in time period. So we have this H.G. Wells books. It follows these two UK guys. One of them is Bedford, which is this guy who seeks money, who is money oriented in terms of his goal. And then we have this guy named Cavor, who is a scientist who is science oriented, or in the sense of like it's not even overall science oriented, it's very like niche focused science oriented scientist. Okay, and to give a summary of the pairing, it's the type of pairing where it's similar to having a straight man and what's the other one called in that pairing? Straight man and this is why I need to write notes, because you know I think of words and I can't finish them. But it's basically the pairing of similar to the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, or Rincewood and the Taurus from the first books of Discworld. This idea of having the so-called assumed normal person, the so-called average man, with the eccentric person in the story. And so our Bedford, this guy who is money focused, is our assumed normal man, and Cavor, the scientist, is our eccentric person in the pairing. And they meet together because Bedford gets a new home in that area of the UK where Cavor is at. And they start talking to each other. Cavor is starting to use Bedford as I forgot the phrasing, but as like a bouncing board of ideas. And Bedford sees these ideas and thinks, this is a definite way to get rich. I'm going to attach myself to the scientist and figure out how I can make money off of this. So Cavor's idea is he wants to, theoretically, he says, that you can make some type of chemical composition that is anti-gravity, in the sense that gravity won't affect it, and if you can make this substance, theoretically you can do many things with it. And they named this material cavorite, and they use it to go to the moon. And Bedford is originally thinking like this anti-gravity material could make shipping containers and moving stuff very easy, or that space travel could be a tourist attraction with this, and this is his get-rich-quick scheme. And so he basically Bedford goes with Cavor to the moon. They're the first men in the moon because the part of the story is that the alien force that lives on the moon, it lives inside the moon, and this is why we can't normally see them. And the story just tells their adventure on the moon, their adventure to get to the moon, and the adventure back from the moon, and then we have some epilogue as well. So that's the story. That's the story. Those are the characters, or the main characters, and yeah. So that's the story. Basically, if I'm gonna give like some in depth about like my actual notes in here, my actual notes here. My first note is about the introduction by Ursula K. Le Guin, which is, I'm almost sure is the person who did the. I can't remember, but it's like this magician story book. Yeah, this like magical book, really well known writer that I'm just blanking on their work, fiction, which is fine. And my first, my first note during this is about the introduction and how I feel like the introduction is one of those introductions that spoils the book a little bit, because as I said, I never read First Man in the Moon, and it kind of gives a lot of information about the book within the last pages of the introduction, and so I just wrote a tiny note. This is spoiling. I'll come back to this later. So did I come back to it? I'm not really sure, but I finished the book, so whatever. The other thing is this book is like 200 pages long, I think, or I guess around, yeah, it's around 200 pages long, and then there's like 30 pages of like afterword talk by Darko Suvin, which is another author. So, and I think there's also another author who talked in the end of the book, but not very important to the actual story. Basically, I said it felt slow, and it felt slow even though they kind of got to the moon pretty fast in terms of the book. It just, like, while I was reading it, it just, to me, the feeling felt like it took longer than reality, which is just an interesting thing to know, that first part when they're not on the moon really drags out, it feels. So that's like the first part of the thing, but it only takes about it takes about like 70 pages for them to see our first alien, though they had been on the moon for probably the 50-page mark. But you also have to remember that this was like a magazine book, and so I just, like, part of the reason why I thought it was slow was like my expectation that this is a magazine book, and basically what that means is like sci-fi magazine books usually were like published chapter by chapter, and so the speed at which we get to the thing, in my opinion, should be very fast. And me waiting 70 pages just felt like a really long time, especially knowing that I felt like the character pairings of our assumed normal man and our eccentric didn't really meld well in the way that I liked that pairing. And we'll go into that for a second. So our assumed normal man is Bedford, and he is money hungry, right? And he is British, and he is white, and he is upper class. He is upper middle class. What, in my opinion, from how he phrases himself, he's like new money in the 1900s. And he's not my assumed normal man for the 1900s. and partly because I'm a woman and I'm a black woman, and black poor working class people existed, and they are more normal than upper new middle class money. And so that's a thing, like for me particularly, but it's also like this difference of like hundreds of years between this book and me reading it, right? So he's going to be even more not normal for me. But he felt very off in the sense of his assumptions, and it wasn't ironic, or it didn't feel ironic. And it didn't feel like you're wrong. And that's why I wanted to talk about Discworld's Rincewood and the Taurus. Because Rincewood is supposed to be, in this world, he's supposed to be the assumed normal man for this planet that is not normal at all. But he makes the assumption that he is the normal one. And we get to see this as ironic, because as a reader, we know that even though he's supposed to be the normal one, we don't really feel like he's normal. And in this book, I think it feels like H.G. Wells wants us to feel like this man is truly the assumed normal person, which is not true. It's just not true for that time period, and it's not true ever. And when I have an assumed normal character, like this character who I'm supposed to assume is like the normal everyday man, I like it when we get to see this irony that everybody's a little bit different, or even the perception of like this idea of normalcy is questioned a little bit in their character, or in the way that other characters interact with them, and that makes me feel like they are more normal in the world, and I'm more related to them, because it's like I assume I'm normal, but I also know like inherently that I have traits of myself that aren't distributionally or in the bell curve to be normal. And having a character who is at least talked about by other characters, or who is written in such a way that we can see the irony in this idea of assumed normalcy, is to me very important. And that's why I just didn't like him that much. I didn't like the pairing that much. And then we have a very eccentric character, and I'm just saying he's a scientist truly and utterly focused on the science of which he has interest in, which is a thing, and it's fine, it's fine, but it's just like it gets kind of at some points in the story it seems outlandish, and I'll get to that at the end. But at some points in the story, when he is so mindly focused, it just seems outlandish that there would be a scientist who has that much lack, as somebody who is going for their PhD, as somebody who did research, as somebody who is slightly can be slightly very focused on one thing, and know people who are even more focused on one thing than me. I just like some of his ideas seem to be like he lived in a cult, or like in a high control society, doesn't know anything but also like science, and it's really into science. Like maybe that's it, okay? I'm retconning his background to make more sense. Anyway, so let's get to this plot, right? So they build this spaceship out of their anti-gravity matter, and from there they go to the moon, and the moon has plants on it, and it has plants, and the temperature changes is extreme, and between the night and day zone, and there's oxygen on it and water that they could possibly see, the water being frozen elements on their ship when it gets really cold, and the oxygen changing throughout the day, the levels of the day. And so then then they meet the first Selenites, or Selenites? I don't know. They meet the first aliens. I'm going to pronounce it as Selenites, which they're basically, what's it called, bug people, and it's like, I don't think H.G. Wells is the first one to have bug people aliens, but I'm almost sure that this book is the book that like popularized this idea that aliens might be bugs. I'm like almost absolutely sure that this is the book that popularized the idea that aliens might be bugs. So we get some of that. The bugs try to kill them. They have that cool like Dragon Ball moment of like where like I'm saying this Dragon Ball moment because like Dragon Ball is like the first place where I saw it with this idea like if you were to move, I guess Superman also has it, but this idea of like if you were to move planets due to the ecosystem of which your planet which you lived on your planet and how gravity worked and how the air worked and what's on your planet, when you moved to this other planet you were like stronger and better equipped to fight against the indigenous forces. So basically like colonization a little bit with like technological wraps, but it does that type of thing with the idea of like since the gravity on the moon is not as strong as on Earth, we have Calvor and we have Bedford being stronger humans than the natural aliens that live in the Earth. And so when they have this fight to get away from them, and this fight to survive as they had been captured for a second, and they fight and they just completely like obliterate the aliens, just utterly and completely. And at some point, Bedford and Carver get separated in the story, and Carver gets captured by the aliens again. But in this way, and Bedford says, I'm going to leave Earth. I'm going to leave the moon and maybe get help or something. And so Bedford leaves. Somehow, we don't know, the probability is very low because Bedford is not a scientist, somehow able to man the ship and make it back to Earth, make it back not just to Earth, but make it back to the UK. Goes to this area of the UK and doesn't get the exact help he needs. He gets help because he has no money on him, except for like literal, the moon has gold on it. I didn't mention this because it's not super important to the story. It's just like one of the many moments of Bedford trying to find out how to logistically make the most money off of this scenario which he's in. And so when he comes back to Earth, he has gold on him, he is bloody and wretched looking, and he has a spaceship, right? And he gets some help, and his spaceship gets stolen by like a young kid, and he's stuck on Earth, and he'll never be able to go back to help Carver. And he feels bad about it somewhat, but now he has gold and he's rich. And he writes a book. He finishes a book over the experience, and most people think it's fiction. Some people believe it's real. And at some point we get to the epilogue of the epilogue or closing of the series. And in this epilogue-ish part of the book, we realize that Carver is actually still alive, and he's been trying to send messages to the Earth from the planet, from the moon. And from the moon the whole entire time, and he explains what happened to him as he was gone, as after him and Bedford had split. And that's basically the whole entire story. And it's good, but it's a good, short, quick read. But that's that. I don't even know what this note's supposed to be. It's just like, I just have a note in here that says nothing. Or I have a note in here that says nothing. Oh, okay. So now let's just talk about the aliens. And we're just going to talk about how the aliens look and stuff, because I think that was the most interesting part of the book, and not really the plot or the characters. And what this alien hierarchy says about like what H.G. Wells felt in story and stuff. So one, the aliens looked. So as mentioned, the aliens look like ants, or they look like bugs. They don't all look like ants, but they look like bugs. We also have like some interesting. Also have like some interesting. What's it called? Descriptions of these aliens. Like in one description right here on this page. At first, as I peered into the radiating glow, this quintessential brain looked very much like an opaque, featureless bladder with dim, undulating ghosts of convulsions withering visibly within. And, like, this is how the aliens are described. And it's just like this weird idea of describing one part of the alien with another part of an organ, body part of a human. And I just find it to be very weird and odd that these are the descriptions for this intelligent being, or these intelligent beings are in a far off world. That every time H.G. Wells makes one description of one body part, he uses another body part to say, like, this is what it looks like. Their brain of this creature looks like a bladder on his head, and it convulses a little. That's weird and gross and like perfect. And like, it's a perfect read. It's like perfect imagery of like oddity, but it's just like a weird thing to note. And at the same time, as we're noting how weird the aliens are described physically, we also make note of things like how as Carver describes their actual hierarchy system of these aliens, he so as Carver actually describes these the actual aliens, he I'm gonna quote this page here, or it's page 201. That wretched-looking hand, tentacles sticking out of its jar, seemed to have a sort of limp appeal for lost possibilities. It haunts me still, although of course it is really in the end a far more humane proceeding than our earthly method of leaving children to grow into human beings and then making machines of them. And it's like this idea of this one is Carver has seen the way that this hierarchy system works for these aliens is that you are destined to but you are destined to you are destined for your role at birth, and then they make genetic modifications as a youngin to you so that you can do your destined job best and well. It's like watching Gattaca, but even more, like, the mutations are more disgusting in terms of like human things, because what this scene is explaining is that this alien, whoever this alien was born, is born to be a herder, and herders need really big arms or something, and so they are modifying this being that's already born, and after the fact of their being born, they are going to get their arms enlarged. And then Carver says this is so far more humane because in human society, we wait for them to have ideas and thoughts about what they want to be before we destroy those ideas under the system of capitalism and racism, sexism, and classism. Under these systems, we destroy them when they're older, and then we make machines after we have destroyed their bodies, is basically the analogy that's going on when I'm reading this. And I'm just like, this is weird. This is like a freaking weird society that I wish I could see more of, besides just like this Carver after epilogues kind of ideas that we're getting. And then the other part that's really grand, and it's so grand that Darko Suhan quotes in his little idea of like this world, so I didn't have to go back and quote it myself in my notes. It's from chapter 23. So I came upon a number of young Selenites confined in jars from which only the forelimbs protruded, who were being compressed to become machine minders of a special sort. Right? So this is the idea going for, this is probably 201 or 202 or 201 or 200, the same page of this idea of compressing their bodies and making them machines. Then this other part which I liked, or which reminded me of, there's this one part that reminded me of Book Eaters by author who I forgot their name. I'll post it somewhere, right? Maybe, I don't know. We'll figure this out. That reminded me of Book Eaters, but it's basically just the idea that these people, these aliens who are given the roles of being mothers, their children are taken away from them so that they can do other roles that have been assigned to them at birth, as going on with what we were talking about, reminding me of like this idea of Book Eaters, partly because the moms have like some of the type of like the same type of grief of the main character of Book Eater, of having their children taken away, and then Carver not realizing this. And this is what I'm saying about like Carver being so such the scientist that he doesn't realize anything except the science was interesting, which is just so weird, because he looks at all of these. He looks at all these hierarchy things, all these things of feudalism, taking to the extreme of having your choice being born to you, and then literally having mutations and modifications to enforce that into the hierarchy of the world. And he turns around and says, oh yeah, this is far more humane. This is just such a better world. There are no wars or anything like this, because everybody has been domesticated, because everybody has a king over their head in terms of this hierarchy. It doesn't seem to be better, and it just seems odd that he lacks the foresight for this. And as we see at the end of his epilogue, his lack of foresight is so extreme that he tells them that humans have an issue of like, we just declare war for no reason. And then he, all of a sudden, his messages stop going through, and the information that he was able to give before, the people on Earth realized that the static that went through with his messages coming from the moon to Earth, and sometimes it would like cut off, might have been intentional by these aliens. And that's the idea we're left with at the end of the book, which is just so sweet and good. And then you think, man, I read this book, maybe I should read Ender's Game, just because, for fun. You know, like, that's the feeling I feel after reading this book. But I also feel like I'm gonna go in a magazine, like a sci-fi magazine binge. So, I am. I like literally bought like a analog magazine, Analogs, which is a sci-fi magazine that's still ongoing now. That is known for like space travel and like space related facts. And I'm reading it now because I read H.G. Wells, and that's the vibe. So that's the thing. And I was gonna say, like, the questions basically are my review. So did I like the book? Yeah, I like the book. Could I recommend the book? I totally could recommend the book. It's a sweet, short classic, and it's exactly what I like in sci-fi. And like, could I see somebody else liking this book? Yeah. So that's my review of this book, or like the ideas of this book, which is really good. Then we have The Witcher, The Blood of Elves. I am so tired of this. Of talking. So we have The Witcher, The Blood of Elves, and I have no notes in this, and I'm just gonna wing it. Just gonna wing it. The summary of my feelings is I really liked it. I really liked it. The second book of the suggested reading order, I didn't really like it. I'm not here for the romance, and this book wasn't really super romantic. So I was here for this. It was mostly just like the beginning of the end of times. Basically, the story follows Geralt of the Riviera. He is a witcher, also known as the Wolf, silver-haired monster hunter. uses limited amount of magic. It is a high fantasy story based around the ideas of the Middle Ages, as well of European Middle Ages to the Renaissance era, is like how the futuristic elements of like this high fantasy looks. So Gerard's our main character. Gerard is the guardian of a child of surprise, which is basically some princess named Ciri who comes from a fallen kingdom called Sintra. Yeah, a fallen kingdom called Sintra. Gerard takes her under her wing, and we have a lot of cool montages in this story, or like cool training arcs for Ciri, our character, that involve Gerard sometimes, don't involve Gerard at all, sometimes involves other characters like Yennefer or Triss or the Temple Folk. We just get a lot of different montages in terms of like Ciri's growth and Ciri's abilities, which I totally and utterly liked. I actually like this so much because when I watched the television show, I felt like it did it bad, and it truly did now that I read the book. So, or their montage version of like training. So this was pretty good. The story, so yeah, the story is mostly training, to be honest, but it's also like understanding it puts the, the baseline for the political landscape for this continent, which I don't remember the name of, but because there's no maps in this. If there was a map in this, I would definitely remember the name of this continent. But it puts the beginning of that political ideas within this book for the rest of it, because as we are seeing through like this tale of stories between what was I saying, Ciri, the child of surprise, between her growth and her learning skills, we also get to see the ideas and political motivations of every other kingdom, fiefdom, empire, and their relations to wanting to get this girl, because she is a princess of a fallen kingdom, and by having her on your side, it could give your kingdom legitimacy for its takeover, or legitimacy to declare war and forget about the peace treaty. It can give you a lot of play and power by having this girl on your side. And Geralt, our Witcher main character, because this is the Witcher series, partially he's the main character, he, being the guardian of this girl, is going out of his way to protect the girl, and the story cements his, this book cements his reasonings to protect this girl from all these other factors and forces and stuff like that. We also get to see some of the feelings of like distant love and loss of love for that Geralt has with Yennefer, which Yennefer is a sorceress, an enchantress, a highly skilled magician who is super powerful and super knowledgeable and just like dope and cool, and like her lines are just so beautiful in terms of how she teaches Ciri in that magical training arc, because as somebody who has been a tutor and has been a teaching assistant, has been a student, I was just like, if I had a teacher that was just like that cool, I would definitely really like the subject matter and like the honesty at which Yennefer does teach is just, and I wish I could do that. Or I it's not even just I wish, I hope and ascribe to this idea that maybe in some type of future I might be able to do that, even though I do actually hate teaching. I hate being a teaching assistant, I hate being a tutor, I really don't like it. But like, it's pretty cool, And then, so we get like this type of montage. We have a whole bunch of different characters in this series, or in this book, that I'm just gonna make some names to, and like my feelings towards them maybe a little bit. So we have Dandelion, which is a bard slash spy and best friend of Geralt of Bavaria, and like that's a thing. It's the use of this bard is, to me, I love it. To me, I love how the bard is used in the story or Dandelion, because in the beginning we get like a prologue in a sense through his story, and through his stories and through his like songs of how the world might be going, but it's also like an unreliable prologue, but also gives you this idea of like the political state of the world, through like every interaction with Dandelion, because he doesn't know everything, but he knows a lot, and he lies for people and for Geralt, so that's why he's like kind of unreliable, but also like very knowledgeable and can move through the world and gives like this really nice element to the story. And then we also have Tristan Marigold, which is another sorceress and enchantress who takes a good chunk of the first part of the book. She is a past lover of Geralt, our main lead, and Geralt's not having any of that, in the sense of like Triss is kind of wants to get back together, and Geralt's like, my heart's just for Yennefer, which is so cute and nice, but you know, it's cute and nice, and then it's also like Geralt feels bad, feels so bad that he's not making any moves or to Yennefer, and the moves he makes are wrong due to his hesitancy, and it's just like a perfect story, and it's a perfect like minor love story, and doesn't take too much of an overplay, because this is why I hated I didn't hate the second book. It's more like the book previously in the suggested reading order was really a lot about their love, in my opinion, and I'm here for the political intrigue and the machinations that go on into the world, and so I thought this was cute as a subplot, but if this was the main plot, this would have been painful. That would have been painful. And then some other characters, we have Dishra, which is like a king, I think he's like a spy lord, is kind of the idea of what I've gotten from him, a counselor to a king or something, I'm not really sure. And he's just spying and has information. Then we have the interplay between the Novigards, which is the kingdom or the empire that has come and taken war and conquest over many of the lands, and had made Sintra fall, and made Ciri become this princess without a mom, without a dad, without a grandma, without a home to return to, and to only be able to go to The Witcher. And we have our political machinations of the other force. I forgot what the other force is called in this book that isn't Novigard, like in terms of like, when I say the other force, what I mean is the coalition of kingdoms and fiefdoms who are against Novigard, who are human. They have their own political machinations going on, because they would like to declare war on Novigard and maybe regain some of these lost lands between them and the Novigard area. Then we also have the political machinations of the magicians, and those from the Magician Towers, court, whatever. And we get to see a little bit of that, not a lot, in this book. But we know that the magicians aren't happy with kings plotting without them, and their position on what's about to go on. So that's really interesting. And then we just have the genocide of all the creatures who are the intelligent creatures who are human, also as like a sub thing within this book, because since the Novigards attacked, and they are assumed to have like some elfish in them, the humans are attacking elves are attacking humans, because humans had previously within this prologue or the other books, we kind of know in the subset of the setting is that the humans have come in from afar and taken over elvish land, and for hundreds and hundreds of years at this point, and some elves are very angry about it. And particularly these elves, and not just these elves, there are dwarves and gnomes and stuff like that, who are also on the elves' side, or these elves being the squirrels, side, to take back lands and stuff like that, which is very interesting in the sense of, we, just from like this info that I've given you, we have like 4 different political machinations of groups, and I'm here for that. So just to go over it again, we got the Witcher, whose own interest within Ciri is just like making sure she's safe and letting her grow in whatever way is possible. We have the Novigards, who just want to like conquer the whole entire land. We have the machinations of the political kingdoms that are against Novigard. Then we have the magicians and their ideas around how they can make the best bang for their buck. And we have the squirrels, or the Solitas, which are just like a elvish, non-human group of people who want to fight the humans, which is causing internal conflict in the kingdoms, because they exist throughout. And then we even have other machinations of like normal people, right? So I really like this book. If I had to give this book like the question review ratings, did I like it? yeah, I did. I freaking did, and I can't wait to get the next book. Would I recommend it? I totally would recommend it. Already recommended it to other people. It has been recommended to me. So could I see somebody else recommending it? Could I talk to them about it? Yes. And maybe I should play the video games. I've never played the video games. I don't know if I should play the video games, but I'll think about that. But I'll probably just read the book and not play the video games. And stitching stuff, we're gonna figure that out. I started reading, or I'll mention 2 things, or 3 things. Okay, we'll do it real quick. So we got Logicomix, which is by Apostolos Doxiadis and Christos H. Papadimitriou, and the art's by Alakos Papadatos and Annie D. Donna. Anyway, these guys are Greek. I'm gonna say all of these guys are Greek. I read the other, when I was in college. I read Doxiadis' novel, Petros or whatever. It's called Uncle Petros and Gold Box Conjecture, which I really liked. I just dropped the book on the floor. Anyway, which I really liked, and so I really wanted to get one of his other things. When I read Uncle Petros, I automatically, after I finished the book, I went to try to get myself a math minor. So I was a CS major, so it was like just take 2 more classes. But yeah, so I can't wait till I start reading this, or I started reading the first 2 pages, and it's definitely a different graphic novel than I thought it would be, based off of the first 2 pages, just to give you a vibe idea of it. The first 2 pages takes I'll take a picture of it at some point, but the first 2 pages takes like this idea of having our Apostolos as a kind of main character, which is not what I was expecting. Like, it's kind of self-bibliography. It's weird and not what I was expecting. So I don't know if it's going to take that turn throughout, but it takes the idea of like this character knows that they're in a comic, and they are telling you a story with that type of knowledge in a present tense. Now, will it do like some jumps, histories, or other stuff in terms of math and science? I'm not really sure, but I'm here for that. I'm here for the theology of everything. The other thing which I'm reading, going on just the idea of me finishing H.G. Wells. I say I read a short story or poetry every single day, and so I have stopped. taking a break for the poetry and short stories that I was originally reading. So like poems for camp, I haven't read that in a couple days. And after reading H.G. Wells, I just wanted to get like some sci-fi magazine kind of stuff. So I got Analog for June. I got the July-August 2023 edition, and I've been reading that, and I've been really liking it. I didn't really want. I basically went to Books A Million with my sister, and I gave her the option of picking a couple different sci-fi mags, and I would buy one of them. And she picked Analog for the cover for this July-August 2023 edition. She was like, "This is great." I thought, oh, okay, because I didn't really want to read like science factoid articles, but after I started reading it, I was like, I am here for that. And Analog's great because it's mostly space sci-fi oriented, so it really does fit well with, reading The First Man in the Moon, or any H.G. Wells thing, right? The other thing which I'm reading, which I'm almost done, I have like, let's say I have like 160 pages left, or no, I have 150 pages left. I'm reading the second book for the Southern Reach trilogy by Jeff Vandemeer. This book is titled Authority. I've been really liking it. If I had to make a comparison between this book and the last book, it's not as much of a biological horror, and it's still a biological science apocalyptic, but like the horror element's not there. And I was talking to my sister, who is a biology major and interested in ecology, interested in being out in the field. She's the one who recommended the first book to me, and we've been talking about the second book because we're reading it at somewhat the same time, though not at the same pace. And we both really liked the first book, and she has been reading the second book slower because it's not as much on the ecology in terms of the situational descriptions as the first book. And I was telling her that I feel like the second book is like working inside some of the government training centers for ecology, which I've been to, and she's been to as well. And her first reply was like, "No, it's not." And then I was like, "No, it's like if I work there as a computer scientist, that's like this political machinations, not really seeing ecology is exactly how it would work if I worked there." And she was like, "Oh yeah, it would be. That's why I don't like it." Which is so funny in the sense because she wants to be out in the field, and this book is definitely not that. So but I do like the book. I think I don't want to give any spoilers right now at this exact moment, but maybe I'll come back, record some more later, and just give you the feel for where I am in the book. But man, I definitely like, just to say, the main character of the first book is not the main character of the second book, and I definitely dislike this main character more than the main character for the first book, which is kind of sad, but his way of thinking is not as dry type of fun as the biologist when the biologist got in the first book. So that's basically all I have to do for this. I don't know. I'm thinking, is there any other books? And what I'm thinking of doing is dividing my posts from leisure reads, so like having videos of just my leisure reads, what I read that month, and then and as well as non-leisure reads for what I read that month. Right, kind of is what I'm thinking of, or maybe I'll update the leisure reads every single week and the non-leisure reads once a month, and I'll have like a bunch of books. But I've also noticed that my book reading, I read books they're in the same genres, kind of, but they're quite different from each other. So I don't know what I'm going to title this, but we're going to figure this out. And I'm going to finish the editing for the other one. Anyway, well, I'll see you later, or you won't see me later. And maybe I will wear a different mask. Okay, so let's see. I'm back. I have finished Authority. It took some time, but really it took like 3-4 days of actual reading. It's just not every day did I do actual reading. The book's like 350 pages or 340 pages, around that marker, right? So, let's talk about it. Let's talk about the Southern Reach trilogy and how I finished the second book, and like stuff like that. So first, let's talk about the summary of my feelings while reading this book. So basically, I liked it less than the first book. What the first book gave me and what the second book gave me weren't bad, but what the first book gave me was more of like the apocalyptic sci-fi descriptions that I appreciate and love, and just make me feel like I am running through the forest or playing outside as a younging, or hiking amongst the master naturalists in my family and the biologists in my family, coming out as like a computer science person who doesn't really much appreciate those things. A lot, sometimes I do, and sci-fi apocalyptic horror, if done with beautiful descriptions or eerie descriptions, reminds me of those types of moments in my life. And the second book did not do any of that, and I was expecting it from reading the first book and being like, oh yeah, Jeff Vandemeer really understands nature and how creepy it is as it is. This book didn't really showcase the creepiness of nature, and that's one of the reasons why my sister, who recommended the book to me, who recommended me read the first book, and who we were supposed to be reading the second book around the same time, she is still reading it, even though she has like a month more time than me, because she's a biologist. She is somebody who is one of those people who got me to go on these walks, got me to go hiking, got me to do all this nature stuff. And this book isn't about a field researcher. It's about a dude who we know him most as Control, but his actual name is John. So Control is spelled Control. But his actual name is John, and he is a spy for Central, which is some type of like authority, government, secret entity that takes orders and makes stuff happen in the backdrop for this story and for the original first book, right, in the story. And so, getting some more about my like summary of feelings, just rehashing that idea that I said earlier, in like another one, that Southern Reach, like this, I like this book, and I think I could finish it faster than my bio sister, because I'm not bio, and every single time I went to government training facilities for biologists, or like research facilities for biologists as a youngin', I would always vibe with the people who never went out in the field, because I'm into computer science and engineering, and a lot of those people stay in the building, stay doing the servers, stay doing stuff like that, and just talking to biologists and having them be weirdos, and doing logistics and hierarchical stuff of working in office politics. And that's what Control is doing. Control is, our main lead, is doing office politics while also being a spy, while also having a mental breakdown, while also trying to figure out a trying to be a fixer for a failing government entity that is the Southern Reach, the government facility that sent our first character from our first book out into the Area X, the ecological disaster zone, and we get to see basically the after backdrop of how these types of decisions got made for the first book. Within this second book of Authority, right? And that's cool. That's cool. It's cool. It's cool, and I found it to be interesting, but I also found it, like, as I said, I found it to be more boring than the first book, and that was a thing. What else am I thinking about? So I went over, like, some of my feelings. I sort of went over plot. We have characters. There are too many characters for me to remember, for me to know. And even if the character was important, I a lot of times forgot who they were. And that to say that there's a couple things that I'm going to say that I liked about Jeff Vandemeer and his character descriptions, but also, like, I dislike. So, as I said, this is office politics, and if you've ever been in a big office, or you read books about offices, if you've never been in an office, or, whatever, that's huge. There are people you know, people you kind of recognize, people you recognize and know their names, people you recognize and don't know their names, and people you recognize due to the quirks which you attribute to the person, right? And Jeff Vandemeer does a very good description of describing these situations, of how our main character has in relation to what the other people in this facility, other people within the facility of Southern Reach. He has good descriptions on that, and I'm like, oh yeah, totally, this dude. Yeah, this is exactly how I would think of this dude too, from the description. So I don't think I notated any of those. I only have 2 notes. I only have 2 notes. So that's the thing. I appreciate that, but there's still too many characters. And when I say too many characters, there's this character called Lowry, and you're gonna it's somewhere in the middle of the book, or maybe I don't know where. I'm gonna say in the middle of the book, or maybe a third way into the book, you first get the name Lowry dropped into the book, and now I am 2/3 of the way in the book at this point, and my note is, who is Lowry again? Because there's just so many characters that even though this dude, I should know his name, I started questioning if I knew this dude's name or not, if I really attributed the right types of quirks and vibes to that name at 2/3 into the book. Because there's just so many characters that I just had trouble recognizing them for who they were at times, which is fine, I guess. It's fine in the sense of, like, going on to character descriptions and using quirks as markers to remember the characters by. Our lead, Control / John, because they're the same people, does that even after the first introduction to an extent, so you can kind of give a guess vibe even when you forgot. Like, when I said who is Lowry again, my notes underneath was, is this the old director? I'm confused, maybe. And the reason I could have said that is because when our lead describes this character, when our lead remembers this character, he's also remembering emotions and vibes and, like, other things about the character to give me something more to hold on to. And I appreciate that because there's so many characters, and I just don't know who's who. Then my other thing about this book is, let's see, at this moment, 289 pages in, we're 290 pages in, really. At 290 pages in, I told you this book was 340, around that page mark. So that means we have 50 pages left to the book. I finally get to experience the thing that I've been wanting to experience the whole entire time. Environmental horror, like true environmental grotesqueness, strangeness, mental collapse of our character as they experience what nature really is, and what it means for it to increase into your zone, and it was only the last 50 pages that I got to experience that, and even that was minimal in comparison to the previous book, right? Because it's only the last 50 pages, and it's not like in every single page of the last 50 pages do I get to experience this type of ecological horror. And so I'm slightly sad, but I really did like this book, and not only did I really like this book, for the did I like it question, I would definitely recommend the series. I'm not watching the movie though, so that's the thing. Supposedly the movie just wasn't that good, from the vibes I've been getting from people who did watch the movie. But they didn't read the book, these people, so who knows? Maybe it's more enjoyable if you read the book. And then, so I liked it, I would totally recommend it, and I expect other people to recommend it to me if they had read it, as showcased by my sister recommending it to me, but also just like everybody who's read this book. And it's such a great vibe. It's such a great vibe, and I really liked it. Like, if I was reading this book, it's not a 5 out of 5, but like probably like a 4 out of 5 in terms of just continuing on of ideas and in settings and plots, and like putting down a foundation for our first book, and hopefully this new foundation that we have for the first book takes us to a whole entire new place for the third book, which I am going to take a break, and I'm not going to read this for a while. The other thing that I wanted to mention was I started reading Circe's. I'm a page in. Does that mean I started reading it, or does that mean I'm a page in? You can decide. I know nothing about the book in terms of me actually reading it. I do have like a slight gist of what this book's about. Some nymph, lower god tier Greek Roman mythology thing, feminist story of making your own path, choosing your own life, blah blah blah. That's what this book's about, from what I know and have heard about this book, and I'm gonna read it for myself. So that's what one is. Place for me to hide. Where's a place for you and me to hide? Can I free?